Hello and welcome everyone to Fuel Poverty Action's series of monthly learning sessions, Fuel for Thought, from fuel poverty to climate justice. Um, for those of you who don't know, Fuel Poverty Action is a group of ordinary people fed up with being robbed by greedy energy companies through spiraling bills and rip-off prepayment meters. We campaign to protect people from fuel poverty. We challenge rip-off energy companies and unfair policies that leave people to endure cold homes. And we take action for warm, well-insulated homes and clean and affordable energy that's under the control of people and communities, not private companies. And this space, Fuel for Thought, is our place to share research and lived experience, tackle lies, and clear up confusion as we ask and answer questions with experts, activists, and campaigners. Today, we're going to be talking about mining, militarism, and renewable energy. As I'm sure all of you will know, um, only well, it's only been a couple of weeks now. There was an attack on Venezuela, where the head of state was kidnapped, as a stark reminder of the role of military power and violence that's inherent in obtaining valuable resources. And while we're not going to be talking about oil today, I think this happening is very relevant for the session, where we're going to be talking about um, the role of the relationship between the shift to cheaper, greener energy and the military, and why doing away with military is central to achieving clean and affordable energy that's under the control of people and communities as we would like it to be. First of all, we're going to hear from Daniel Selwyn, who's a researcher and educator with the London Mining Network, and whose research focuses on the intersections between resource extraction, the arms trade, and British imperialism. Daniel, thank you very much for being here with us. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be joining you all today. I'm just going to share my screen and presentation so that people can hopefully see. Is that working for everyone?
Yeah, I can see that.
Brilliant. My name's Daniel Selwyn. I'm educator and researcher with the London Mining Network. I'm also a geography and politics teacher in London. I've actually just had to leave one of our NEU International Solidarity meetings. So if you hear any noise in the background, that meeting's still ongoing, but I'm also trying not to get locked in Hamilton House this evening. So that's kind of my twofold aims for this discussion today. But I'm really pleased to be joining, like I said, and that Fuel Poverty Action are having this really important focus on demilitarization and its integrity to a just transition and to climate justice more broadly. So the London Mining Network is a network of more than 20 human rights, environmental and solidarity groups. We work with communities around the world who are affected by the activities of mining companies that are based in or funded from London. And you can see some of the groups that are part of our network there. We work with communities from Eritrea to the DRC to South Africa, to Indonesia and West Papua, to Colombia, Peru, Brazil, to India. So we have a real global focus and network because the footprint of British imperialism and British mining companies is equally global. So here are some of the main things that we do as an organization. I'll just describe these before I go on to kind of think about these connections between mining, militarism, and renewable energy more broadly. The major bread and butter of our work is solidarity and amplifying the voices of frontline communities. So we work with communities that are affected by British mining companies. We organize visits for them to attend the annual general meetings of these companies, to speak to and lobby parliamentarians, to hold protests. And we have ongoing sort of working groups on Latin America, on India, Africa, and on militarism as well. We do research and sort of corporate watching of the mining industry, the social and ecological harms that they perpetrate around the world, including waste, human rights abuses, as well as on the transformative solutions to these, such as the just transition. And then some of the work that I'm most involved in is around the education, where we provide workshops, speakers, and resources for teachers and educators to use in the classroom to raise awareness about the mining industry and affected communities. I wanted to start by situating this conversation and dialogue that we're having today in the colonial history of the mining industry. And if you look at the image in the top left of the slide here, that is a photo of the oldest European settlement on the African continent, or south of the Sahara, and it's known as Elmina Castle. And Elmina Castle was founded as a fort for trafficking enslaved Africans in the 15th century in 1454. So before, 4 decades before the invasions of the and conquest of the Americas under Christopher Columbus. And for any Spanish speakers in the audience or room here, will know that Elmina translates as the mine. So in the earliest inceptions of European conquests and colonialism on the African continent, mining and extractivism has been at the core of it, both of enslaved people and labor, but also of natural resources. If we then fast forward to the history of some of the mega mining corporations, the biggest corporations in the world that are listed on the London Stock Exchange, BHP, Glencore, Rio Tinto, Anglo American, each of these multi-billion-dollar corporations self-evidently didn't become these mining behemoths innocently or kind of more recently. They've become these huge corporations on the basis of colonial dispossession of indigenous lands and Aboriginal lands, and of frontier massacres in settler colonies such as Australia, where BHP kind of formed, in Southern Africa, where Anglo-American formed under the kind of settler colonial expansion on the Witwatersrand gold and diamonds, under the company or auspices of De Beers as well. And by the end of apartheid in 1994, Anglo-American controlled over half of all private industry in South Africa. And then in the kind of first few years of the new independent democratic South Africa, Anglo-American moved its headquarters to London. So what this history shows us is that the very same mining companies who are now positioning and portraying themselves as the industry that is going to bring about a green industrial revolution, that's going to bring about a green transition, that's going to provide the resources and materials necessary for the renewable energy technologies that many, if not most countries around the world are hoping to transition towards as a response to the climate and ecological crisis. These companies are the very arsonists of our planetary incineration. They are the ones who are responsible for the colonial, the social, and the ecological harms that have accumulated over many centuries. So as much as they try and portray themselves now as the firefighters, it is incumbent upon us to historicize their role within the world as the arsonists of the planetary incineration that we're currently experiencing within the climate and ecological crises. So one of the pieces of research that I did or coordinated as part of LMN was our Marshall Mining report on the connections between extractivism and militarism. And one of the things that we used in order to start framing this research was this really incredible Global Environmental Justice Atlas, which is a kind of counter cartography of social conflicts around environmental issues all over the world. And we can see on that map here just the vast quantity of environmental conflicts happening, and the kind of bar charts there showing us the involvement of these British mining companies in those. So Rio Tinto alone, 29 mining conflicts around the world, Glencore 21, BHP and Anglo American. So these companies are at the forefront of land conflicts and environmental conflicts happening around the world. The mining industry is also one of the most deadly and dangerous industries for land and human rights defenders around the world. So Global Witness produce a report every year on land and human rights defenders who've been killed or assassinated or disappeared defending their lands from the incursions of various corporate and state interests. And the mining and extractive industry consistently ranks as the most dangerous industry that is shows no qualms in employing the most horrific forms of violence against the very human rights and environmental defenders who stand in the way of the extraction and accumulation of natural resources for the benefit of all the industries at the base of every single global supply chain, whether that be wind turbines and solar panels, or whether that be nuclear weapons, drones, and F-35 fighter jets. But it's equally clear that the transition to renewable energy technologies is dependent upon an extreme acceleration and intensification of mining and extractivism. If we have a look at some of the kind of information on the bar charts here, we can see that an electric car consumes or requires a vast quantity more of resources than a conventional car does. Obviously, it's not powered on fossil fuels, but it is equally dependent on environmental and social costs and harms, whether that be the 40,000 Congolese children mining cobalt that goes into making the electric vehicles, whether that be the attempted coups of Evo Morales in Bolivia to get better access over the lithium triangle in Bolivia and in the Latin American region. We can see that whether it's offshore wind, whether it's solar power, all of these renewable energy technologies require natural resource extraction. And as an organization that work on the front lines with the communities who experience that mining, this means that the expansion of renewable energy technologies is equally dependent on land dispossession, habitat destruction, biodiversity loss, and a lot of soil and water contamination that undermines the means of subsistence and survival for many indigenous and other frontline communities. So when we are or if we are guilty of sometimes uncritically applauding the move towards renewable energy, it's also incumbent on us to be conscious and aware and standing in solidarity with the frontline communities who are bearing the brunt of these policy decisions. And that is not a reason or justification to continue with a fossil fueled extractive economy, but it is a challenge for us to think about the importance of reducing resource consumption and demand around the world. And I think for the purpose of this discussion, the industry that should be placed on the chopping block firstly is the military industrial complex, which is the biggest or one of the biggest guzzlers of resources and mining around the world. So if we start to think about the connections between these industries in a little bit more depth, one of the really important things or narrative interventions that I think we need to be making is around this issue of critical minerals. So many countries, including the UK and the European Union as regional organizations, are very much pushing this new narrative, although it's not actually new. It's something that was employed during the Second World War as well. The idea that certain minerals are being deemed as security or important to national security, or they're deemed as critical. And now the movement or the transition towards renewable energy is providing a kind of smokescreen for a lot of minerals to be classified as critical minerals for the green energy transition. Now, Global Justice Now produced this report showing that what the UK lists and deems as a critical mineral, 6 of these minerals have absolutely no utility whatsoever in the green transition pathway. 15 of them only have a very small proportion that will be going into renewable technologies. What is actually being deemed as a critical mineral is more often than not deemed critical in the military industrial complex, and particularly in rerouting global supply chains away from China, which has a dominance of a lot of particularly rare earth elements, which are very important in the production of semiconductors, but also in a lot of military equipment like drones, due to the high magnetic properties of those minerals. So the use of critical minerals or the narrative of critical minerals is one that is very much conjoining renewable energies and military technologies, and one that we have to disrupt because whilst we might all agree with the necessity for transitioning to renewable energy technologies, it's still allowing a diversion and an expansion of resource accumulation, which, as I said, is having very negative environmental and social costs around the world. These were some of the graphics that were released in that report, and it just again goes to visualize the vast resource consumption that goes into making different pieces of military equipment. If we look at the F-35 fighter jet, for example, which is responsible for flattening every single university and the vast majority of schools in Gaza, the murdering and maiming of tens of thousands of children, these F-35 fighter jets don't begin in the factory, they begin in the extractive zones of the global south, where bauxite is being mined, where titanium is being mined, where all these other resources are being mined that are going into making weapons of mass destruction that are responsible for genocide and war crimes around the world. If we look at nuclear weapons are obviously based and grounded in the extraction of uranium, which has huge and negative impacts on waterways and livelihoods for people in those extractor zones where uranium is being mined, from Madagascar to Gabon to Niger. So again, I think what this is showing us is the kind of often unspoken and unseen uses of mining to the military industrial complex. It's interesting when I was doing the research for this report and was calling up and speaking to the press officers of all of these big mining corporations. They love to adorn their brochures and their reports for their annual general meetings with pictures of solar panels and wind turbines. They love to talk about the fact that their minerals go into building schools and hospitals, but funnily enough, they don't include any images of missiles or of drones or of the weapons that are responsible for killing people all over the world, even though their minerals are just as essential, if not more, to those industries of death as they are towards the infrastructures of life. And here we can kind of see a cartography a counter cartography that we produced, that kind of linking together where British mining companies have their operations. So each of those kind of little icons shows where a mine that is owned by the British mining company, and how that overlaps with areas where Britain is involved in training the army and the soldiers, where Britain has military bases, or where the UK is involved in active combat and conflict in countries across every continent around the world. So we can very clearly see here the overlaps between extractivism and militarism, and that it wouldn't be possible, if we come to the last slide, which is here, our Marshall mining cycle, that communities don't willingly allow themselves to be dispossessed and evicted, their waters and soils to be contaminated and polluted without resistance. And we unequivocally support the right of communities to say no to mining and to resist mining companies. So what mining companies therefore rely on are weapons of repression and violence. And those weapons of repression and violence, whether they're surveillance drones, whether they are bullets, whether they are assault rifles, those very same weapons have been formed and created out of the resources that are being mined in mining zones and extractive zones around the world. So the Marshall mining cycle is a way of bringing together and thinking about the interconnections between militarism and extractivism, in the sense that we would not have any F-35 fighter jets or tanks or nuclear weapons without the extraction of resources, and equally we wouldn't be able to, or mining companies wouldn't be able to extract natural resources without the means of suppression and violence as well. So hopefully that's been a helpful overview to think about the synergies between militarism and extractivism, and how renewable energy is kind of situated within that. And I look forward to hearing the other presentations and all of the questions afterwards too.
Thank you very much for that, Daniel. That was very, very helpful. Much appreciated. Um, and yes, please don't get locked into the offices of the NEU, as you said, as much as we would like to keep you for the conversation afterwards. Um, Next up, we're going to hear from Laura Steichen, who's the Global Systems and Policy Manager at the Climate Community Institute, who leads research and strategy development on international financial systems, militarism, and global industrial policy. Laura, great to have you with us.
Hi, thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Lovely to learn about this network's work and excited to be in conversation with these colleagues. I'll just totally agree with Daniel's remarks and will echo many of the similar sentiments. So I think we should have a good discussion. Let me just get my slides going. Okay, yeah, good.
Yeah, we can
Great.
see that. Thank you, Laura.
Okay. Fabulous. Okay, well, um, just to repeat the introduction, my name is Laura Steichen. I'm the Global Systems and Policy Manager at Climate and Community Institute, and I'm also a research manager at our new project called Transition Security Project. Just to give a little bit of context on Transition Security Project, or TSP, as I may refer to it in shorthand, this is a collaborative research center jointly founded by Commonwealth in the UK and the Climate and Community Institute in the United States, where I live. We're a new think tank which investigates both the US and UK military industrial complexes as economic, climate, and geopolitical threats. Um, this slide sort of lays out the scope of our work at TSP, but you can find out more at our website, transitionsecurity.org. But today I'm going to primarily focus on the climate impacts of militarism. So really understanding militaries as massive consumers of national natural resources, from fuel and energy to minerals, and really sort of grounding military activities as being inherently destructive. Ecological devastation is a central aspect of militarized violence, which really takes place across geographic and temporal scales. So I'll just talk about a couple of the ways that we see that manifesting today. Just start by saying that we should really understand war and militarism as defining features of the extractive economy that causes climate change and sort of broader ecological crises. Both the US and UK militaries have really played foundational roles in building and protecting the global fossil fuel economy that created the climate crisis. I'm not going to go into that history here, but I just want to foreground my remarks with that context, and happy to share some resources and publications from our networks that gives more of that historical grounding. But focusing on the present conditions today, war and the military activities that support war making more broadly are significant yet underaccounted for sources of global greenhouse gas emissions. I imagine maybe many folks here today are aware of this link, but it's something that's, clearly not talked about commonly or broadly understood. Globally, militaries are responsible for an estimated 5.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and for context, that's roughly double that of commercial air travel. The US military, the largest military in the world, is the largest institutional consumer of oil in the world and emits more greenhouse gases each year than many entire countries. In the UK, official figures say that the military accounts for about half of central government emissions. But independent research suggests that that real number could be much higher once you sort of account for the supply chains of military industries and other activities that are often excluded from official accounting mechanisms. But despite this really massive carbon bootprint, as we sometimes call it, although I feel like I think that's like too cute of a phrase, but maybe we should stop that. But military emissions are really often excluded from international climate accounting. Reporting is voluntary of a country's emissions from its military in like UN multilateral processes, and even to the extent that data does exist, it often only covers and captures a fraction of the true impact of broader military industrial complexes. So this is like clearly a key way to understand military's relationship to climate change, but this emissions aspect is really just one part of the story, as Daniel was referencing, really from sites of extraction to weapons manufacturing, to the deployment of weapons, to the disposal of weapons, which is often quite damaging military industries and associated military activities, like really leave a trail of environmental destruction at sites around the globe and yeah, dispersed into the atmosphere. So much like the historical relationship between fossil fuels and military power, mineral extraction, as has been referenced, has long been entangled with military strategy. So what's now commonly referred to as critical minerals, a term which itself originates in military planning, are really foundational to warfare. Daniel did a great job of outlining this graphic on the slide, which hopefully isn't too blurry. It was published by the US Government Accountability Office. It visualizes some of the military applications of rare earth elements, something we hear a lot about, not because they're actually very rare, but in large part due to China's dominance in rare earth supply chains. And in recent years, we've really seen this relationship, this longstanding relationship, intensify in different ways. Some analysts have described this as a sort of new military mineral complex. In the United States, where I live, the Pentagon is actively moving to secure control over critical mineral supply chains using various mechanisms. This includes stockpiling, financing extraction and processing projects, in some cases taking direct equity stakes in mining companies. So these actions really reflect a broader national security framing, which we see in the United States mineral strategy, which is rooted in sort of great power competition and the perceived need to maintain military and technological dominance. This is significant for climate and the environment for various reasons. On the one hand, this matters because many of the same materials coveted for weapons are also essential to decarbonizing the global economy. Many of the same minerals are core components to, wind turbines, solar panels, very significantly batteries, which are essential for electrification of, transport, grid storage, etc. And the sort of risk here is that when military demand for these materials expands and takes precedent, it sort of risks diverting materials away from civilian energy transition uses, and really shaping supply chains around security priorities rather than climate needs. Um, just because I'm short on time, I won't go into more detail about this study that's attached to this graphic on the slide, but happy to talk about it more if folks want, and I'll drop the link in the chat. But this is a recent study we published that demonstrates how the Pentagon's recent stockpiling of key energy transition minerals could be repurposed toward the green transition. So this is just the materials that the Pentagon has recently solicited to stockpile, two of them, cobalt and graphite, how those could be used to expand electric buses in the United States. On the same wavelength as Daniel with this graphic, which is a very useful visualization. I think something that's useful about this graphic is it helps sort of distinguish between these different terms. So we often refer to, the minerals essential to decarbonizing technologies as energy transition minerals or ETMs. This is not interchangeable with critical mineral designations, which often come from governments. So not all minerals labeled as critical are actually tied to the energy transition. Not all energy transition minerals appear on official critical mineral lists. I know this seems like a little bit like, okay, who cares? It's just terminology. But what's sort of important to understand about critical mineral designations is that they often authorize sort of new modes of state intervention to ensure access and production. So like financial support, regulatory fast tracking, sort of other market crafting efforts. So it's sort of more than semantics. And yeah, as this graphic and Daniel's remarks make clear, it's clear that the sort of push for critical minerals isn't only or even really primarily about a green transition. But really, regardless of the end use of a material, to echo Daniel's remarks, it's like we're just really critical or important is maybe a better use in this context to recognize sort of and problematize extraction regardless of the end use of a mined material. So mining is enormously damaging, drives land dispossession, water contamination, like permanent ecological destruction. It really can't be understated how damaging mining is for the environment and for communities. But a really key difference between the sort of petro energy complex and this potentially emerging mineral energy complex is that, unlike fossil fuels, minerals can be recycled at scale, right? So in theory, this makes a circular economy possible, one that could like significantly reduce the need for new extraction, potentially eliminate the need for new extraction if we really set up recycling and planning of the use of these materials in ways that was actually attached to social benefit. Borrowing a line of thinking from a colleague and a geographer, Julie Klinger, who does great work on this topic, is one way to think about this is like really the only way to ensure a mineral never becomes a part of a circular economy is to blow it up in a bomb. Okay, so I was asked to highlight a potential framework to address these issues, and I'm a classic researcher, like short on time to actually talk about like what we do about this, so we can talk more about it in the discussion if folks want. But I think like at the most basic level, and as this graphics sort of hopefully alludes to, what we should do about it is really take on war and militarism as important barriers to environmental and climate justice. And like the most basic way to do that is to shrink the war machines that drive ecological devastation and human suffering. We can talk about strategies if folks want during the discussion. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Laura. Really appreciate that. Yeah, great contribution. Next up, we have Dr. Philip Johnstone, who's Principal Research Fellow at Sussex University Science Policy Research Unit, SPRU. Philip has a background in human geography and science and technology studies, interested in the political and democratic implications of socio-technical change and innovation. And Phil is here to talk to us about how where the role of nuclear energy comes into this conversation. Phil, thanks a lot for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you, and it's great to be here. And I've really enjoyed the previous two presentations. And I'm not at Sussex anymore. I left there. I forgot to update my bio, so sorry about that. I'm at Utrecht in Tartu now. But basically, I've been researching nuclear for over 10 years now, since my PhD in Exeter with Andy Sterling at SPRU, who can't be here. But basically, I'm going to talk. I don't have slides because I just want to try and keep it succinct. And really, the point I want to get across is basically that civil nuclear power, so-called civil nuclear power, is driven to a large extent by military interests. We're all very familiar, probably, with the story of the Second World War, and that civil nuclear power was born out of the military complex and the weapons program, and it was sustained, and interlinkages were sustained through reprocessing, through uranium enrichment. There was a time, the end of the Cold War, the peace dividend, whatever you want to call it, when there was this separation. And the point that we've made through 10 years of research in the UK, but it is applicable to worldwide nuclear complex, is that civil nuclear remains intimately tied to military nuclear, that military nuclear is dependent on civil nuclear for its continuation, and that we subsidize the military nuclear complex through our energy bills in the UK. And so I'm going to be talking about that. But before we kind of get to that point, it's important, I think, just to quickly change the nature of the discussion, because the so-called nuclear debate in the UK, particularly in the UK, is so extraordinarily biased and misleading that it's almost disorientating to actually have a reasonable conversation. We are told time and time again various myths by politicians and often repeated by newspapers, Ed Miliband and others, that the UK is going to have a nuclear golden age. And the nuclear had, let's actually think about the UK nuclear renaissance, as it's called. It began in 2008. It's now 2026, and not a single kilowatt hour of electricity is being generated by new nuclear. Costs have tripled. It's incredibly delayed. Meanwhile, renewables have gone from 10% to over 40% electricity generation. We're told UK was a leader, a world leader in the nuclear industry, and it needs to be again. It wasn't. It only ever sold two reactors. It's historically poorly performing industry. Again, we're told that it will lower bills, it will be cheap. It won't. Hinkley C, according to the National Audit Office, will increase our energy bills. It will hit the poor the hardest. Sizewell C will push our bills up because we'll be subsidizing it uh, before any electricity is actually produced. We were told in 2008 that if new nuclear was not built by 2020, the lights would go out, the grid would collapse, and it would be impossible to mitigate climate change unless nuclear was built quickly. And an extraordinary thing happened that no nuclear was built, and remarkably, the lights remained on. We have been told in recent years by government that civil and military nuclear are separate. And that simply isn't the case. And I'll talk more about why. I've talked about the historical links and the links between uranium enrichment and that kind of the material link between civil and military nuclear. But the work that Andy Sterling and I have done is basically looking at the UK and the industrial interdependencies, particularly between the UK's nuclear submarine industry, which underpins the deterrent, and civil nuclear. And we can see through this story that since the year 2000, the UK has had a crisis. The elite have had a crisis. And the crisis is this. The submarine nuclear program is a mess. It's a disaster. It's getting more expensive. It's hugely expensive, burdensome. And this is a big problem. And in 2003, for a brief moment, there was an extraordinary time when it was decided, let's have an energy policy without nuclear for the first time since the 1950s. Within 2 years, Tony Blair had, for reasons that no one knows to this day, done a reversal and said, we need lots of nuclear, we need to build it. The secret and the truth of it all lies in, if you go and look at the military documents, even back then, you can see the submarine industry saying, in order to sustain the skills, the expertise, the industries to build nuclear submarines, which weapons depend on, we need a constant stream of civil nuclear to kind of get that investment going in the training and general nuclear skills that can be transferred to military nuclear. And since then, we've seen countless examples of this. We've seen there was a secret report only obtained through Freedom of Information request written in 2014 saying that the plan to resuscitate the UK nuclear submarine program is to synergize it with civil nuclear. We saw Rolls-Royce in 2017 saying the great thing about small modular civil reactors is they can relieve the burden of the Ministry of Defence for supporting skills and expertise for the weapons program. We saw Emmanuel Macron say that without civil nuclear, no military nuclear, without military nuclear, no civil nuclear. And we have seen countless examples of this that we pointed out in 2014. And a point of interest was when we pointed this out, we were called by nuclear enthusiasts conspiracy theorists. Now we fast forward to this new era of whole society, rapid military mobilization. And the latest reports by Keir Starmer's Labour Party, if you go and read the industrial strategy, they basically admit it. It's now official policy. We need to twin civil and military nuclear. We need to exchange skills. So it's gone from a conspiracy to declared government policy. But still, this is vastly under discussed in the British media and in much of the discussion. We still talk about civil nuclear as an energy thing, as a thing in the context of climate change. But whether you look at the time it takes to build, the increasing costs, all of these different factors, things that are acknowledged by the Royal Society, by the government's own figures when they used to release figures comparing energy costs, it's quite evident that alternative low carbon solutions are faster and cheaper. So there really isn't a rationale for nuclear based on energy. The reason civil nuclear continues is because it is required for military reasons. And that's the context in which we need to discuss it. Now, just kind of getting on to maybe the theme of this event a bit more. Where this is really bad, this UK nuclear complex and the global nuclear complex, is not only because it is by far the most dangerous threat we face in terms of the immediacy of a planetary scale catastrophe if these weapons were used. Not only that, but it warps energy policy. It increases our energy bills. It adds at least 5 billion to national energy bills per year, and that's probably a vast underestimate that is being taken from our energy bills to the military nuclear, and it distorts the democratic process. There is no political appraisal of these issues. There is no accounting by the National Audit Office. The nuclear complex is something that warps democracy. And as we think about this, we need to think about the drivers as we are in this event, because, of course, as has been pointed out, uranium in the Congo in the Second World War, it was the military uses that drove the extraction of uranium there. We're experiencing a nuclear modernization, as it's called, trillions being spent on modernizing nuclear weapon systems, extremely resource intensive. It needs a lot of rare earths. It needs a lot of all kinds of things to have a nuclear weapon system, to have these submarines. But of course, as we've been pointing out, while there is so much attention towards renewables and reducing demand, this military demand is often not discussed, and that's what we're here to do. So reducing and destabilizing the extremely dangerous nuclear complex is a key part of what we're doing here. And I think just to add into the mix of our conversation, one note of caution, which is dealing with the issues of the injustices and the damages done by renewables mining is absolutely vital, and the issues we've been talking about. However, one thing I have noticed is a few years ago, very powerful nuclear advocates became extremely concerned about renewables and their resource use all of a sudden. And it was interesting. They didn't seem to be concerned about mining and so on previously, but suddenly renewables were terrible because of this. And of course, these are hugely important issues, but we also must distinguish between technologies that I'm going back to the 70s and the hippie ideas of renewables. It was all about demilitarization and peace and democratization. And I still hold on to that hope that renewables can be used to demilitarize and decentralize, whereas civil nuclear, as I say, is intimately attached to the most dangerous weapons we've ever invented. So I hope some of that's made sense, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thanks. That was really useful contribution. Yes, that's it for our speakers today. We are now going to move into the second part of the session, where I hand over to everyone else that's here for your comments, questions, clarifications, and also your contributions. So if you'd like to come in, please raise your virtual hand, which you can find at the reaction button on Zoom there. And yeah, don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you. Already, Lee? Yeah, please come in. I just want to make sure that you can. Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you to all the presenters. Very, very interesting stuff. I've read quite a bit of your work, Phil, because I worked on a nuclear waste project with Teesside University. And I agree, nuclear energy is a joke, too expensive, and I've spoke to nuclear stalwarts who work in the industry, and they told me that the link between the civil and the military is very tight. My question is for all the three presenters: is where does AI fit into this? Because I know that AI. I mean, Rolls-Royce, you mentioned, Phil. What's their latest statement is oh, we could rule the world as with our modular reactors powering AI. It's like I thought these nuclear reactors were supposed to be like providing energy to households. No, no, now it's for AI. And there's this the scumbags in the uh, share this link in the kind of venture capital world are all over this space as well. So how, yeah, what do you see about the nuclear and AI, Bill? What are your thoughts about this? And the other two people, where the critical minerals, these AI systems, shouldn't call it AI, it's large language models, and they're kind of image producing things. AI is a market term anyway, but yeah, the these systems are very resource heavy, and I think there's a crossover with the kind of minerals that you're talking about. So yeah, what are your thoughts? Thanks.
Shall I go for it first?
Go for it, Phil.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee, and yeah, good to meet you. And great questions. I think the AI thing is fast. I mean, a few months ago there was that ridiculous trip by the United States delegation to the UK, and Starmer was crowing about how it's a fantastic opportunity, and it was going to be AI data centers and powered by small modular reactors to reignite the transatlantic power. And of course, what you say is absolutely true, that it's amazing how opportunist the nuclear industry is. I've got to hand it to them. Really, it's one day it's climate change, the next it's energy security, the next it's military for a while, then it's AI data centers. Just anything. The solution is always nuclear, it seems, and that is part because of its centrality, I think, to something deeper, which is this military nuclear structure, which is tied to this dream that the UK still has, that the UK elite still have, of being a top table global power, tied to the United States networks. And what we're seeing now with AI is this military complex, the tentacles of it, sort of spreading across more domains. And you can see these feedback loops and interactions that the nuclear weapons are part of the military, but then also the movements towards AI. Huge amount of the AI investment now. The Silicon Valley, it all used to be peace and love and all this kind of thing, and now the money really is in weapons and AI applications of that. So you're seeing this synergy between big tech and the nuclear complex as part of this overall expansion of the military complex overall. And I think, again, every time this kind of thing manifests, in every shape that it manifests, I think that's the challenge for us, to just keep on drawing attention to the fundamental military links that are propelling these kind of things, like the AI episode with Starmer and all these kind of things, because they're often not necessarily reported on. So we just need to keep banging away at that. Anyway, I'll finish there.
Yes, Phil. Daniel, Daniel, you want to come in?
If I can just make just a brief contribution to that. Thank you, Lee, for the question. I mean, obviously, you mentioned already just the vast quantities of resource extraction that go into making the supercomputers and data centers that are at the core of the kind of materiality of AI. But one of the other things I think it's worth adding to the AI conversation. I won't even get into my views on AI as a teacher who sees my students use it for their homework and the damage it does to our critical and creative thinking. But there are companies, new mining companies like Cobalt Metals, which has been orchestrated by Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and other big, billionaire barons who are using AI for the kind of satellite mapping and geolocation of resource deposits. And they've got a big focus, particularly on some of the critical metals that we've spoken about already, and have been given, I think, 7 licenses for resource extraction of lithium in the DRC alone. So the way in which AI is being brought into the mining industry as a way to find new resource deposits, I think, is worth noting, as well as the way in which AI and kind of this algorithmic warfare is being deployed within the military industrial complex. If we look at how the Israeli occupation forces have been using AI systems like Lavender and Where's Daddy in order to identify kill lists and targets, I think we're seeing AI as a very, very dangerous proliferation both within the mining industry and the military industrial complex that has to be resisted on those multiple fronts.
Thanks, Daniel. Laura?
Yes, just quickly adding on to what others have said, thank you for the question and the thoughtful remarks. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right to note that beyond military applications, some of these materials are, yes, increasingly in demand for civilian technologies such as large-scale data centers and AI computing infrastructure. I hesitate to even characterize them as civilian technologies because it's not so black and white. But yes, this further intensifies this perceived supply chain constraints. And tech companies are, as was noted by others, like increasingly marketing themselves as military contractors. At one point, this was controversial. There was contracts that were canceled, and now they happily tout themselves in service of the national security blob and as the more efficient version compared to the sort of traditional Big Five industrial contractors. And it's, yeah, important to note that like money moves quite swiftly into the military and into these private companies, especially at a remarkable scale in the United States. It's another example of a completely unnecessary source of resource demand. And it's also like important to consider how different modeling that we see for the need for extraction assumes different types of demand that's absolutely unneeded. This isn't related to AI, but at Climate and Community Institute, I could find the study and put it in the chat. We did some modeling a couple of years ago that really pushed back against some of the demand assumptions for different energy transition minerals, which assumes essentially converting our transportation infrastructure in the United States, where we heavily rely on individual cars over mass transit, just assumed replicating that same model. And of course, you can really transform our transportation sector in a way that is less resource intensive and also more beneficial for people's lives, and also really constrain the amount of materials that you need. So just important to like a lot of the modeling around demand is takes a lot of bad assumptions, and like a lot of the modeling is just kind of bad in terms of its how the method and what it's based off of. But yeah, these are such good questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Steve, would you like to come in?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my question really is regarding the aspect of the mining, and as was mentioned, the use of 40,000 children in mining in DRC. So what I'm curious about is how that aligns through in terms of the controlling mind that actually has allowed or is now still currently allowing that to happen. So obviously the history of colonialism is a terrible key part of why that things were set up maybe in some of these countries like that, because it's a very hundreds of years, or as it was being described, hundreds of years worth of embedding that kind of approach. And people in the country that these resources are being stolen from, they don't maybe understand, or do they understand either the politicians, local government, or the government themselves, or is it just corrupt, or do we have any work that's really been done around all of that? Who is the controlling mind in allowing these abuses ecologically or social injustice to be occurring at the moment? Maybe to Daniel, I'm not sure, maybe he'd be the...
Thanks. Just to clarify the question, you're asking like how is this situation able to like continue when
yeah, pretty much. And what is it clear who the controlling mind is? Is it one particular party? Is it the local government, the central government in the country, or is it the corporate mining companies themselves that are just abusing the situation? And are they driving the continued existence of that issue?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's I mean, at least in the DRC, there's a range of actors involved, and I think, I mean, Glencore, which is an Anglo, is the biggest cobalt producer in the world and has the two largest cobalt mines in the world in the DRC. But a lot of the, obviously, when we're talking about the 40,000 children that are working in mines, some as young as 4 years old, they are working in what was kind of called artisanal mining. Which is kind of low industrial technology mining and small scale sites, but it's obviously being driven as well by the industrial mining and actors that are involved in that. We can't separate that from the big multinational corporations like Glencore, but then you've also got militia groups that control mining sites, and they are being funded and supported by groups from Rwanda, which is then being supported and armed by as well the Western powers that are there, and then Chinese companies that are heavily involved in the extraction and the refining of those minerals too. So there's a whole entourage of different actors that are involved, and I think the plunder of the Congo has been a central part of, like you said, colonialism for many centuries now. And I think it was mentioned in one of the other presentations how the uranium from the Congo, from the Shinkolobwe mine, that went into making the nuclear weapons that were then dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So Congo's been central to that, and one of the reasons why. Independence leaders like Patrice Lumumba were assassinated by a combination of the CIA and Belgian and intelligence services and MI6 was because he wanted resource sovereignty and nationalization of those resources. So Congo's never been allowed to have that sovereignty of its resources just because it should be the wealthiest country in the world. I think it's got deposits worth $24 trillion worth, and every single Western power, as well as now the kind of emerging powers of China as well, they want a piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a web, as you describe, which would make sense, underneath it all, we could say that colonialism was the birth of it all, you know.
Yeah, and it's not ended.
It's just stealing resources from people all over the world. So that's the cause of it, really, isn't it?
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Stephen, Daniel. Ruth, you would like to come in?
Yeah, I had three questions actually. One for Phil and two for Dan. Phil, when there's talk about energy prices, the cost of nukes is barely mentioned. If there were good figures, preferably taking into account the things that you say are left out when they normally do it, we could try to insert it. Like when we're doing media, for instance, and reports into discussion of pricing. I think that the nuclear thing, the military thing has become a little complicated now because, ironically, Trump has managed to convince some people who were for demilitarizing that actually we need defense after all because we need to defend ourselves from the United States. So it's not quite as straightforward as it was. But I think people still are very sensitive to the fact that they don't want their bills going up and they don't want to be paying for the military through their electricity bill. So it would be useful if there were figures that we could also help to make, to get other fuel poverty groups to put forward. So that's one question. And should I do the ones to Dan at the same time, Amal, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think go for it.
I think. Okay. Dan, you talked about what's not needed for the green transition, but there is some stuff which is needed for the green transition. And the question is, what's being fought for in terms of meeting that need in a way that is not exploitative? Because it should actually be a positive, of course, for people to have needed minerals in their soil that could go towards a green transition. but we're miles from, that being the case. But in terms of what people on the spot are demanding, um, what is there that we could support? That's one question for you. And the other one, just I'm tuned out a little bit at one point and kind of came back in, and you were saying something about rerouting away from China, and I wondered what that's about, because um, I don't see China being any worse than the rest of the world.
Phil, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth, for the questions. Great questions, and you're correct there that it always astonishes me actually. Again in the UK, but elsewhere, there's regular concerns about energy costs and energy bills going up. And another sign of just how privileged nuclear is in this country is that almost never is it pointed out that the governments, when they, as I say, used to actually reveal the figures of nuclear, National Audit Office report 2016, other reports, their own agencies have actually said that it's going to increase energy bills and it's going to hit the poor the hardest. So if we're thinking about, that was the phrase used by the NAO. So if we're thinking about fuel poverty and the cost of living, that's what nuclear is going to do. But it's almost never mentioned, and the focus is on renewables when actually renewables have fallen in cost considerably, and it's the other way around. So you point to something that is very intriguing in general, that it's just basically not discussed. And in terms of reliable figures, I can share a report that we did in 2024 where we calculated the additional cost of nuclear in the UK because of the military subsidy. There's other reports. The Royal Society did a report, which used to be a very pro-nuclear organization. And it was a remarkable report because it showed there was no scenario for future low-carbon energy supply that included nuclear that was cheaper than one that a non-nuclear low-carbon scenario. But again, it was barely discussed. And there's other reports out there that, I mean, Lazard, who's the finance main costing agency, it routinely publishes costings that show, nuclear is far more expensive. But again, coming back to the point, that is what is so revealing about nuclear and why it is a special case and why it is attached to the military, is that it really doesn't matter how expensive it gets. It doesn't matter how much citizens are going to have to fork up in their energy bills to pay for it. The government will proceed because the government needs it for something else that has nothing to do with energy. And regardless of whatever people's views, because you're right, just one more thing to wrap up. You're right, things have become more complicated, but and the gamble that the UK government has made in the last years, it's basically said, let's just come out and say that it's important, civil nuclear is important for military nuclear, because people are, scared of Putin or whatever. That's the gamble they've made. But in actual fact, the argument I think needs to be made more strongly now than ever that far from protecting us, nuclear weapons make the world more insecure, more dangerous, and we need that argument out there more than ever, I think. So anyway, I'll post links to some of these reports.
Instead of that, or as well as that, Phil, is there any chance that you could work us up a very, very small fact sheet with like 3 points, citing sources that, can be phrased accurately in a popular way?
Yeah,
The kind of thing that we can give to our spokespeople when they go on LBC about the latest rise in energy prices. They can say, oh, well, of course, X% or X pounds off your bill comes from such and such.
sure. Give me your email or whatnot, and or
Send it to Fuel Poverty Action.
Fuel Poverty Action. Brilliant. Yeah, will do.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can send you a
thanks.
little message in the chat, Phil.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'll come in on Ruth's other questions. Thank you, Ruth, for both those questions. I want to just start very briefly by building on what I said previously, and without I didn't want to come across or any intention of portraying the Congolese people as passive victims of all of the imperial and colonial plunder and exploitation happening, because we are very proud at the NEU to be working with Congolese teachers unions. We've hosted and worked with the Basanja Coalition that work with women in the mining industry as well. So there's lots of resistance and struggle happening within the DRC against the various actors that I mentioned. And that kind of brings me on to what you were mentioning around what are some of the communities demanding or struggling for within the green transition. And at LMN, we're not an anti-mining organization. We work with trade unions that represent tens, if not hundreds of thousands of mine workers. Um, and one of the things that is a fundamental pillar of what we support is the right of communities to say no to mining. And that if there is a mining company or if the state is coming in to mine on their lands, they should have a fundamental right both to free, prior and informed consent, and to say no if they don't want to. So in terms of the resources going into the green transition, I want to just echo what Laura was saying earlier in terms of when we're demanding demilitarization as a pillar of climate justice, so that those resources can be moved towards the green transition that we need. We also need to be considering and thinking about how we reduce consumption more broadly, and that's also some of the work that climate community have done that was mentioned around mass investments in public transit and infrastructure, rather than kind of everyone having their own or even multiple cars, because that's going to massively reduce consumption. It's also the circular economy that's been mentioned, and recycling of resources. It's changing production processes to remove any kind of planned obsolescence that leads to more resources needing to be extracted. So if all of those things are done in tandem, we get rid of the industries that are harmful to both people and planet, like the military, and we make these differences and changes to the way that our economy and societies are organized and function, then we would see a massive reduction in the resource demands around the world. And that would be empowering for communities to be able to say no to mining, as well as the communities and states who want to use their natural resources in order to be able to help them to develop. And then on the point or the question that you said around China, when I was talking about rerouting global supply chains away from China, I was referring to the how that is one of the major imperatives of the military-industrial complex within NATO in particular. One of the reasons why Greenland is so clear within the sights of the Trump administration is because Greenland has one of the largest deposits of rare earth elements. And as Laura was saying as well, with the brilliant work that Julie Klinger has done around this, rare earths are not a rare due to their kind of geological scarcity. They're classified as rare because of the dominance of China within the rare earth supply chains and the extraction of them. And because rare earths are so central to military supply chains, one of the reasons why areas and places like Greenland are under threat currently is because the US and other Western countries want access to their own rare earth supply, so that they can cut China out of these global supply chains as part of the kind of superpower rivalry and conflict between them. So it wasn't a value judgment on which kind of superpower is better. It was just a commentary on how supply chains are kind of being rerouted to try as part of the kind of trade between them.
Thanks. That's clear. It's probably because I tuned out.
That's okay.
Thanks a lot, Daniel, Phil. Laura, I wonder if you have any comments on this. Anything you want to add, maybe? Not necessarily. But...
Yeah, I guess I'll just something I think that I've been thinking about how to work on and message around more is just considering the very high level of state investment that's basically always required to start up new mining ventures and to de-risk these mineral supply chains. And so, the while Daniel is right that the part of this push to control, own, who knows, Greenland is the rare earth access that would provide, that the amount of investment and time that it would require to develop that infrastructure is massive, and is most certainly subsidized by the state. So it's just another thing to have an eye towards, as we think about advocacy opportunities. It's just the level of state investment in these ventures, which are, yes, often completely out of sync with real need or demand.
Ruth, you want to come back
Could
in?
I do a follow-up question,
Yeah, please.
Amal, following Daniel's reply? The stuff that you listed when I asked about what people were demanding are kind of demands that we're making here. And I wondered if there are demands coming from the trade unionists, the miners in the places where the mining's happening, um, that work towards that same goal,
Yeah,
or how they engage with those demands about recycling and obsolescence and reducing use, and the military. How much is that? Are there people saying that kind of stuff in the Congo or wherever that we can quote, or is that really coming from outside and two prongs of the same fight?
Yeah, I think it's coming from multiple sides really, and I think because I mean we work with communities, like I said at the beginning, all over the world, and we work with some trade unions that represent mine workers, and their main focus is on jobs and terms and conditions and what's happening around mine closures. But then we work with indigenous communities whose concerns around habitat destruction, water and soil contamination. So there's just such a multiplicity of communities that live around mining affected areas, that it's kind of hard to kind of homogenize their demands into one or two. But I think usually, when we have the kind of demand of mining affected communities that has been as part of kind of a global networking campaign, it's been around the right to say no to mining. So for whatever various reasons that might be, communities want the right to say no to mining projects on their land. And then, like you said, groups like Fuel Poverty Action and networks like the London Mining Network, we are able to take those demands and apply them in the context in which we work, which is how do we support communities to say no to mining? It's by pushing forward policies that reduce the demand for natural resources here in the UK. It's by pushing for circularity of kind of resource economies, public transit, and all the other things that I mentioned. And when it comes to the military, there's definitely things that we'd be able to send you in terms of quotes that community members say, but they're the ones who experience the connections between militarism and extractivism, not in an abstract or theoretical sense. They experience it on their bodies, in their daily lives, because they live in the mining extractive zones, where the resources are being taken, and they also experience the violence and the surveillance of the mining industry, of the military. So even if they don't articulate it necessarily in the same way that I am now, they're the ones with the most powerful knowledge and experience of why these industries have to be resisted collectively.
Great. Can I ask you the same thing I asked Phil? Send us the quotes.
Yes, I will. We're currently working on a second edition of the Marshall Mining Report, and it's going to include a lot more voices from the community within it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. lots of I just want to just mention there's lots of things happening in the chat. Fiona's asking if these links can be sent in a follow-up email, as well as yeah, Phil, you're very popular with this this little key quotes document that hopefully we can get. Fiona is also interested in that, and we have someone here also, Crispin, who says is very involved on the ground with the local community who live around Glencore mining areas. Um, Trying to make surveys about mining extraction and war impacts, and is making a call for more support to make it powerful and target Glencore Mining Corporation. Um, thanks for that, Crispin. If you want to come in and say anything about that, you're very welcome. Daniel, you want to cut? Is that a direct point? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel like I'm about to get locked into the building, and I can hear the facilities staff trying to lock up around me. So I might have to make my apologies for the last 10 minutes, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. Yeah. No worries.
That's
Daniel,
been
thank you so much for having with us, and thank you for your support in putting the session together.
my pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure being part of it. Thank you for all the questions. I look forward to staying in contact.
Sorry, Daniel. Sorry.
Have a good evening, Daniel.
I would like to put something, yes, about that. So, as John says, mentioned about this Glencore report and the work just involved with us. I'm also involved with this climate activist on the ground in the eastern part of the Assis. In order to make that studies, that service to about Glencore mining impact in that local areas which they operate, they making extractions, to make surveys with local people, local community who live about that impact. It's very important, as you know, about Glencore mining extractions in our regions, in our countries. In the last year, we're just making small activity on the ground in order to push Glencore's this activity to come up on their agreement, their actions. They are really sustainable extractions, the sustainable explorations area, and to respect local communities' agreements. Yeah, and we still continues in that areas, and we hope to make that report in this year. We're still working on this, and it was very important for us to make that connections. Thank you.
Thanks, Crispin. I've got your email. I'll send you an email so that we can stay in contact. But it'd be great for us as the London Mining Network to have those the contacts and with the local community that you do. So I look forward to staying in touch.
Daniel, thank you very much for coming in, Crispin. Yeah, same. It'd be great to have that report. You might have picked up our email from the chat. Please send it over when it's ready. We'd love to have it. Lee, you want to come in?
Yeah, just briefly. With it, it'd be for Phil and is it Lola, our
Laura?
American speaker, Laura. Yeah. So, how far are we seeing the colonial boomerang, the kind of empire strikes back, and especially in America, you've got Trump running around saying, "Oh yeah, Iran, they're killing protesters." Well, his ICE Gestapos are killing people. Uh, you've got onshoring, which is, and if you look, I've seen numerous reports in Louisiana, data centers coming up, poisoning local communities, and so yeah, how far are we for the sins of not dealing with our colonial past, feeling it coming back to, yeah, coming back to roost.
Do you
You
want
want
to
to
go?
start?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, yeah, of course, extremely timely question. I mean, I think in the United States, have seen a real turn to sort of violent populism, a turn toward repression, and a total leap over forms of democratic engagement. Yeah, use of force to try to retain technological and military dominance. Of course, this isn't new. The US has always done this, but certainly we're seeing a sort of newfound disregard for multilateralism as a an organizing principle. I don't think that we were I don't, in terms of some of the framing of your question, I think certainly we had all sorts of colonial arrangements previous to this sort of recent turn. Of course, I think everyone would agree with that. But we're certainly seeing like this trend towards complete like I don't even really know how to like deliver a tidy analysis of like the Trump administration, but I think these concerns are like I hear you, I'm with you. I don't have a take on what's to come, but I think it's clearly very concerning, and I think as movements we really need to yeah, reinforce the messages that we've been saying for years, but that have renewed importance around the significance of multilateralism and forms of cooperation. From an organizing strategy, I'd be interested to hear what ideas folks have for popularizing those ideas.
Um, yeah, following on from those great points, for me, in terms of the critical minerals, what's really struck me when I've been looking at this for the past years, I come from the sort of energy community, and they're not necessarily always as much critical thinking as we have here. And the thing that has amazed me more than anything, I think that relates to this colonial mindset, is the discourse on China, in fact. And it is utterly amazing that many perfectly good people, colleagues, kind of thing, have taken on this discourse in my field, energy, that China has monopolized critical minerals, and this is somehow a new thing. And I simply asked them, who controlled critical minerals in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s? And could you tell me how they controlled those critical minerals? Uh, and it's amazing that that is in that my community is just rarely asked. What, there was a monopolization before. The way I see it, the mindset is basically this, and I'm no sort of flag waver for China, but what has happened is basically this. Everything was offshored because we wanted the dirty industries, all the horrible mining, all the stuff to make it cheap. We wanted that offshored, and that was fine. There was no problem China doing all the mining when they were just doing the mining and making the cheap stuff. What wasn't supposed to happen was they developed. How outrageous. They actually developed their own technologies, their own innovation, built stuff, and that wasn't supposed to happen. That's not allowed. So now, then suddenly, first of all, the United States tried to ban it was the microchips. They tried to stop the supply of that. Each thing has kind of failed. Now it's the minerals. And I just find it incredibly hypocritical. And something that I think we should almost, just for the sake of robust and balanced analysis, constantly point out that there's nothing new in this monopolization of critical minerals. And that is the colonial. I think what we're witnessing at the moment is just the inability of the superpower to deal with the fact that it's in decline to a certain extent, just as the UK empire declined, so the US empire is as well. And now we're seeing these extraordinary behaviors that manifest strongly in the critical minerals space. So I think we are seeing this. It's perhaps a last hurrah of this particular manifestation of colonialism, but it's obviously quite scary as to what can be done as that descent occurs. So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling, but
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Laura. Do we have any more questions or any more contributions from our audience here?
I'll just adding on to Phil's remarks, which were very useful framing, I think. It's been a lot of great analysis that demonstrates the complementary sort of technological strengths of the United States and China, for example, in advancing the green transition. So even before this sort of like latest Trump foreign policy turn. Of course, there's been like complete consensus, bipartisan consensus in the United States towards this sort of new Cold War towards China, um, which is, yeah, just a complete threat and contradiction to any effort to like a rapid, just decarbonization.
Thanks, Laura. Well, it's been a brilliant conversation, and brilliant contributions for all of our speakers. Clearly, this is, you know, this is something. This is a conversation that strikes up a lot of debate. Um, yeah, much appreciated. Maybe let's just leave it here for tonight. 2 minutes at 2 minutes to 8. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for listening in, for participating. Steve, did you have
Thanks, everyone.
yeah, did you have something you wanted to come in and say? No, okay. And yeah, thanks again to our speakers for your part in making this such an informative session. Yeah, at just a final word on fuel poverty action. We're campaigning for every household to be guaranteed enough energy to cover needs like adequate heating, lighting, cooking through our Energy for All campaign. And if you don't already know, you can take action by signing our manifesto and our petition, and let us know. And also in one of these final links I'm going to send you, please let us know how you found the session, including our speakers. It's very useful to get your feedback. Cheers. Thanks, Connor, for putting those in the chat. Just to close it off, it'd be great if everyone could unmute yourselves, put your camera on, and give us a wave, say goodnight. And I hope to see
Sorry,
you
can
again
I just
soon.
say that the
everybody.
manifesto is actually for organizations to sign rather than individuals. So if you are a member of an organization that hasn't signed, please do think about getting them to do so.
I'll try and get
Thanks,
the
Ruth.
anti-capitalist resistance to sign it next time I have to speak with someone from there.
Awesome.
And I'd just
Anyway,
like to say
nice one, everybody.
thanks so much. And thanks, Laura. It was great to meet you, and I hope to speak to you again soon. So thanks, everybody.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good
Likewise.
night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.